If you reject me because of the color of my skin, then you are a bad person. That's what I used to believe. And that's because one of my first experiences with discrimination was waking up on the floor of a playground. See, there was a group of white kids who had been told that black kids don't feel pain. And so they had grabbed a rock and thrown it across the playground, hitting me squarely in the face. And the interesting thing about discrimination is that it's not the sticks or the stones that hurt. It's the rejection. It's being made to feel like you don't belong. That's what lingers. And ever since those days, I've always had this fascination with belonging. In fact, that's one of the things that drew me to first travel on Airbnb a few years ago. One of my first trips, I was actually planning a group outing. And so I turned to Airbnb to find a place to stay, and I did what all Airbnb guests do. I searched for places, compared homes, made sure that the calendar had a vacancy, and then I messaged my host to say, hey, can I stay with you? Well, the first thing that happened was I was rejected. But I didn't think too much of it because, sometimes things happen, calendars get booked. So I went for my second choice. Reached out, checked the calendar, was free, sent another message, the same message in fact, and again, I was rejected. So I tried again. Third choice, rejected. Time and time again, this didn't make any sense to me. I was a verified user. I had a number of 5-star reviews. I had the money to pay, and the calendar was free. So why am I being rejected? I began to feel that familiar sense that it was something to do with the color of my skin. I decided on a whim that I would actually ask a friend of mine, who is white, to send the same message on the same dates to the same hosts. And she was accepted instantly. See, as a company, our mission is to help people belong anywhere. But the reality is that guests of color, people who look like me, still struggle to be accepted at the same rates as other groups. To try and solve this problem, Airbnb created the Anti-Discrimination Team, a product team whose mission is to ensure that all hosts and guests have equal access to belonging. Now, whenever I tell people that I lead design for this team, well, they always offer the same advice. Just remove profile photos. And it actually kind of makes sense. After all, if a potential host can't see your face, then how can they reject you because of the color of your skin? But Airbnb is a platform that is built based on trust. And there are numerous studies that show that profile photos, images of human faces, help create the trust needed for communities to thrive. See, profile photos are a valuable part of our community, and so the cost of removal felt too high. So we turned to experts to find out, are there any solutions that we can do to try and tackle this problem? And we got a lot of ideas back, but immediately ran into a problem in that because no one has solved this problem before, there is no consensus as to what a solution could be. In fact, we immediately ran into a number of challenges because some of the ideas were often seemed quite contrary to one another. One group of ideas is that maybe we should remove information that triggers discrimination, things like profile photos. But then the other side would say, well, actually, no, you should add information. Try and find a way to create empathy, to help people see they are more alike than they are different. So what do? Well, we did what any product team did, or does, which is we tried to do everything. First of all, we tried removing last names. We realized maybe there is some kind of a name bias that's causing certain groups to be disproportionately rejected. Next, we tried actually highlighting some commonalities between hosts and guests, finding ways to help people see that they are more alike than they are different. We also tried giving greater prominence to trust signals, things like reviews. Let's see if we can get hosts to focus more on objective ways of assessing whether or not they're going to accept someone into their home. 30+ experiments to try to boost the acceptance of guests of color, and nothing was having the effect that we expected. And we were stuck. we felt like we needed something, anything to work. And I remember there being this weight because every single day that we don't solve this problem, people like me and from a variety of other backgrounds are just not being accepted at the same rate. So we decided to remove profile photos, our big bet. Now, because they're so valuable to our community, we spent a lot of time doing a lot of nuanced auditing to uncover where profile photos are present across the entire experience. And then we designed a new experience that removed profile photos across all key product surfaces. But as we did that, something just didn't feel right. You see, if hosts are consciously and explicitly rejecting people based upon the color of their skin, then what happens when a guest arrives at a front door and the first confrontation is when a host realizes that this is someone who doesn't look like me? Will removing profile photos push an online rejection to an in-person confrontation? And we needed a solution. So across a number of nights, went home and started to try and think this through. How can we reconcile these different needs from our community, our mission? What can we do? And I did what a lot of us do when it's late and we're stuck and we're trying to solve a problem. I ended up on Instagram, scrolling feeds. Now, I ended up looking at one of my friends' feeds that we go way back to childhood. And I saw a group photo filled with people that I recognized and a couple that I barely remembered, but it was just a great reminder of those days of being young. And before I knew it, I double-tapped a couple, and I ended up falling asleep. The next morning, I woke up, and there was a message in my inbox on Instagram. And it was someone who I had met as a kid. They said, "I don't know if you remember me, but we went to school together." And I'm struggling to admit this, but I was one of the kids that threw things at you, a rock. And he apologized and said to this day that he doesn't know why he did it. He couldn't quite understand. And I remember when I initially read that, I was infuriated. I was like, how can you not know that you are actively choosing to marginalize me and make me feel like I am less than human? But the more I thought about it, I began to wonder, well, what if my beliefs and assumptions about discrimination are slightly flawed, maybe skewed? See, often whenever we imagine discrimination, or at least the kind of person who discriminates, we typically think about people who are explicit and conscious of their hatred. But I want to play a very quick game that illustrates what the research of my team is helping us uncover. In a moment, I'm going to show you an image, and I would like you to call out audibly how many triangles you see. Go for it. 3, 6, 9, 8. Thank you. See, one of the reasons that I love this image so much is that there are no triangles in this image. It's a great example of the fact that we all have bias. And our bias is a series of shortcuts that our brain makes to help us navigate a world in which we are overwhelmed with information. They're designed to keep us safe. They're amplified by stress, pressure, and uncertainty. And they guide every decision that we make without us knowing. Just now, I asked you to play a game that was really rooted in uncertainty. I turned up the pressure by giving you a couple of seconds and then making it a public thing. There was a level of fear in the room. And what happened? We all straight away jumped to our biases and connected dots that simply weren't there. Now I want you to imagine what it's like for a host on Airbnb. You receive a request from someone who you do not know, and you have to make a decision under stress whether or not to accept someone into your home, which for the majority of us is the most intimate space that we possibly could have. And in that moment, every single fear rattles around in the back of your brain before you have a chance to even realize it. Will I be safe? Will this person harm me? See, as kids, we have been biased to always fear the unknown and trust the familiar. And popular media has conditioned us to view people of color as the other, to view them as criminals, thugs, stereotypes. And with these kinds of things playing in the back of someone's mind, is it any wonder that they make snap decisions that prioritize their own safety? One of the realizations our team has had is that the problem we are solving is not primarily one of explicit racism. The overwhelming majority of hosts on our platform are wonderful people. The problem that we are tackling is one of implicit bias that's triggered by fear and the unfamiliar. And so when we look at our existing work with this new lens, we realize, well, we can't really just remove anything that potentially could trigger discrimination. We also can't just add anything that may override it. It's more dynamic than that. It's both. We have to find a way to balance people's biases by showing the right thing at the right time. Now, with this new lens, we went back and took another look at our explorations to do with profile photos. And we realized that whenever a host receives a request, a key decision point, we should make that as objective as possible. Remove profile photos, surface trust signals, do things that remove the ability for you to overly rely on implicit bias. Then once you have made a decision to accept or decline, the experience changes. If you decide to accept, then we bring back the photo, because now we want to bring in that familiarity, that comfort in the decision that you made. We spent a long time user testing this with Nanako, our lead researcher, Anne, our PM, and our engineering leads, really working to ensure that the rest of the company understood this new way of thinking, because it's a fundamental shift to the way that the platform works. And I remember completely freaking out the evening that we launched, because, it was just before Christmas, one of the highest points, and I was expecting everything to fall apart, that I was going to get a lot of angry hate from a lot of different people. But the experience somehow worked. There were less rejections. We increased acceptance, not just of Black guests, but of all guests. Bookings were up. And even more impressive than that, when we did some analysis on the reviews that people leave after they'd had a stay, we found that the reviews were comparable in trip quality to every other group. And that means that we had found a way to neutralize this bias, to increase acceptance, and create great experiences. We've found a way to help people feel welcome. Now, I want to be clear that this is just the beginning. We have not solved discrimination at all, and we still have so much work to do. There is so much left for us to learn, and this is more than any one team or any one platform can take responsibility for. And although this case study may come across as a bit of a success, I wanted to share it because hidden within it there is a vulnerability, a failure on my part, and something that this process really helped me understand. And that's even though my job is to tackle discrimination, and I believe in empathy and inclusive design, and I aspire to practice it in every single thing that I do, I entered this problem space from a place of bias, judging people who would discriminate through the same lens that they judged me. I viewed people who discriminate as exclusively bad. And that's simply not the case. It is more complex and nuanced to reflect how we are as humans. But we all have bias. And that being the case, we as designers have to understand that if we want to build products and services that truly make people feel included, then we must first be willing to confront our own biases. And this insight is all the more relevant in today's society where it seems that our differences are being weaponized and used to make us feel like we are somehow more different than we are alike. Our team created a framework led by Anne Diaz. It's called Another Lens, and it's something simple that all product leaders can use, just a series of questions that anyone can ask during the creative process to better understand the unconscious biases that we all have. Things like asking, what are your lenses? What is my view on the world or this situation? Being explicit in acknowledging that perspective. Another one is asking who might be impacted by a potential decision that we make, a design decision. When we first created profile photos, we didn't necessarily think of the long term, how this could affect certain groups. But this kind of a question can really help us begin to at least think about the long-term effects of the design that we do so that we can shift more from human-centered design and into humanity-centered design design that does good for more people than just those we consider to be our users. And one of my favorite ones, which is, what if my assumptions are wrong? What if I consider the opposite? What if I assume that people are generally good? How would that change the way that I view the world? I believe that design is one of the most powerful tools that we have to drive positive change in the world. It's about more than pixels or prose. It is a craft that we can use to design a better future, one where we all feel seen for who we are and accepted wherever we go and welcomed because we all belong. Thank you.